70 souls depended on her, and the wind's echo howled like a funeral lament in her ears. Anya felt the ground tremble beneath her feet as the colossal silhouette emerged from the blizzard, a monster of flesh and fury, its red eyes fixed on hers. The warm breath of the gigantic buffalo, larger than any house, fogged the glacial air of 71 dews, while the other 6 giants moved menacingly behind it, a siege of imminent death in the white vastness of Yakutia. And what she did next would decide not only her fate, but the future of an entire generation. Anya felt the cold of decision freeze her blood, but her heart, despite her grief, beat with the strength of 70 lives. The lead buffalo snorted, exhaling warm vapor into the rarefied air. Its horns, thick as tree trunks, pointed at her soul. The other 6, equally gigantic, formed a menacing semicircle, dark eyes reflecting the pale light of the winter sun. There was no hesitation. Ancestral wisdom echoed. The spirit of the tundra respects the courage of a pure heart and the precision of a steady hand. She raised the rifle, feeling its familiar weight. Her numb fingers found the trigger with instinctive precision. It wasn't hatred, but raw necessity, a silent promise to the hungry faces of the village. The wind howled, trying to deflect her aim, but Anya remained motionless, a statue of resilience. She waited. She watched the leader seeking the moment of vulnerability, the exact point where life meets destiny. The buffalo took a step forward, its colossal mass challenging the ground. It was now. A dry crack ripped through the icy silence, echoing across the vast plains. There was no cry, only the sound of life yielding. The other buffalo, startled, retreated, heavy hooves pounding on the ice before disappearing into the blizzard, leaving Anya alone with the fallen giant. The air vibrated with the sudden, heavy, solemn silence. Anya lowered her rifle, her arms trembling not only from the effort, but from the adrenaline rush and the silent sorrow of having taken one life to save many. She approached the buffalo, its massive body lying like a mountain of dark flesh and hide. Its eyes, once full of fury, were now opaque, fixed on the grey sky. A solitary tear ran down Anya's face, freezing instantly. It was an offering of respect, a plea for forgiveness to the animal's spirit, and a lament for the harshness of life that demanded such a sacrifice. The most difficult task, however, had barely begun. The meat, the blood, the warmth emanating from the buffalo were the promise of life for Kitach. But how would she move a mountain of over 5,000 kilograms? Exhaustion hit her like an icy wave. Every muscle ached, every bone protested. She knelt beside the giant, hunting knife in hand, and began the arduous work of dismembering the prey. Hours dragged on, a frozen eternity. Her fingers were numb, but the image of the hungry eyes of the village children, of the elders, spurred her on. Each cut was a prayer, each piece of meat a brick in the rebuilding of hope. The snow continued to fall, covering her in white, but she didn't feel the cold, only the urgency. She needed a sled to transport this bounty back. The idea of dragging it all alone was insane, but there was no other option. With the wisdom of her people, she began to improvise, using the buffalo's own hide and sturdy branches to create a primitive sled. The sunset, painting the sky in purple and orange hues, a spectacle of cruel beauty. Anya looked at the horizon, towards the direction where Kitach waited. The journey back would be even more arduous, a final test of her resilience, but she was not alone. The spirit of her people, the memory of her lost love, and the promise of a future for 70 souls guided her. Anya adjusted the rough straps of the buffalo hide over her shoulders, feeling them bite into the flesh beneath her thick clothes. With a sigh that turned into dense vapor, she leaned forward, forcing her feet to grip the slippery ice. The improvised sled, a colossal mass of meat and bones, creaked and groaned, but barely moved. The initial effort was excruciating, like trying to tear a mountain from the ground. Every muscle in her body protested, but the image of Kaitach, distant and hungry, was an invisible whip that drove her on. She thought of her husband, whose warm laughter still echoed in her dreams. He always said that the tundra tested the body, but it was the heart that determined victory. Her heart, still heavy with grief, now beat with renewed strength, driven not only by pain, but by responsibility. He would have been proud, Anya thought, as her feet found a slow, painful rhythm. Each step was a silent prayer, each pull a promise. Days merged into an endless blizzard of effort. The wind cut her face, transforming her frozen tears into tiny ice scars. The landscape was a monotonous sea of white and grey that seemed to have no end. Her fingers, even inside her fur gloves, were numb and aching, and each night, when she nestled into the buffalo hide to try and sleep, she felt her bones ache. But cold and exhaustion were not her only adversaries. At one point, the sled, with its immense weight, sank into a softer layer of snow, getting stuck like an invisible anchor. Anya pulled with all her might, but the sled wouldn't budge. Despair threatened to swallow her. She knelt, taking a deep breath, and began to dig away the snow with her hands and knife, freeing the sled centimeter by centimeter. Sweat ran down her forehead, freezing into tiny crystals. She remembered her grandmother's teachings about the tundra's patience, and how persistence was the key to overcoming any obstacle. Another time, a loud, frightening crack echoed beneath her feet. The ice cracked, a thin, treacherous line extending under the sled. Anya's heart leaped into her throat. She stopped, motionless, feeling the subtle tremor. Ancestral wisdom warned her of the hidden dangers beneath the frozen surface. With redoubled caution, she diverted her path, testing each step with her staff, guiding the sled with instinctive precision, avoiding the icy trap that could have swallowed her. The image of the faces in Kaitach was her beacon. Little Lyra, with her large, hungry eyes, waiting for her. Vanya, the elder, whose wise voice grew weaker with each day of fasting. And all 70 lives, depending on her strength, her courage. She smelled the meat, a constant reminder of her mission and the sacrifice she had made. It was a smell of hope, of life. The sun rose and set, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange that seemed mocking in their cruel beauty. Anya was not alone. The spirits of the tundra, the memory of her love, and her promise to her people guided her. She was more than a widow. She was the unwavering strength of Kitach, a woman who defied death itself in the heart of the eternal winter. And she would continue, step by step, until the treasure she carried was safe, warming and feeding her village. Anya continued the painful march, every fiber crying out for rest. The sled, a familiar burden, seemed fused to her body. The resistance of ice and snow was constant. Muscles screamed, but she silenced them with stubbornness. The wind whipped her face, snow stung her skin. She barely felt her feet, only the pressure of the straps a necessity. In her mind, Mikhail, her husband, was a beacon. He encouraged her with laughter and gentle eyes. "Anya, my strength," he would say. "Winter freezes water, but never the Yakut spirit." The memory of his voice enveloped her like a warm shawl, warding off the cold. She felt his presence, a silent guide. Suddenly the blizzard intensified, transforming the horizon into a white canvas. The world turned into an opaque mist, sky and earth merged. Visibility dropped. Anya relied on instinct and the wisdom of the tundra. Each step was an act of faith with no landmarks, just the white infinite. She gripped her staff, feeling vibrations. Anya remembered her grandmother's stories about navigating the white hell. "Listen to the wind, Anya. It speaks the truth," the elder had taught. She closed her eyes, concentrating on the sound, perceiving nuances of air currents and inclination. She opened her eyes, more focused, adjusting her route, trusting in memory and subtle inclination. The image of Ketach's hungry faces became vivid, little Lyra's hopeful eyes, the village's heavy silence, the agonizing weight. The buffalo meat, dragged along, was more than food. It was the promise of laughter, warmth, life. It was the hope that pulled her home. Pain had become a constant companion, a dull echo in her shoulders, legs, joints. But Anya wouldn't let it dominate her. She breathed deeply, the icy air burning her lungs, transforming pain into fuel. Cracked lips, rough hands. Her determination was an inner fire that the 71°C winter could not extinguish. In a treacherous stretch, the sled slid into a depression under soft snow. Its colossal weight trapped it. Anya felt frustration, but she acted. With her knife, she cut blocks of ice and snow, using them as ramps to lift the sled. Her movements were slow, methodical, with survival precision. It was no task for a single woman, but Anya didn't see herself as alone. She carried the strength of Ketach's women, the wisdom of the elders, the innocence of the children. She was a link, a bridge between life and death, desolation and hope. Her altruism was an extension of her love. The smell of the buffalo meat, even in the intense cold, was a constant reminder of her victory and her promise. It was the smell of life, sustenance, of a future she secured with every step. This aroma, mixed with frozen sweat, was the perfume of survival. As the sun dipped, casting long blue shadows, Anya felt relief. The wind lessened. The blizzard calmed, revealing a solitary star. It was a sign, a flame of hope. The journey was long, but with each pull, she drew closer. Her eyes, though tired, shone with unwavering determination. She was not just Anya, the widow. She was Anya, the protector, the hunter, the hope of 70 lives. With this conviction, she continued, a tiny point of courage and resilience against the relentless immensity of Yakutia, pulling the treasure that would save her village from extinction, reaffirming that the resilience of a Yakut woman can defy even death in the heart of the eternal winter. The solitary star in Yakutia's night sky, a twinkling point of light, blinked hope for Anya. The wind, now a gentle whisper, no longer whipped her. The blizzard had subsided, revealing the silent vastness of the tundra. Each pull on the sled, once torment, carried a renewed promise. She wasn't just dragging meat. She was dragging Ketach's future. Her shoulders, scarred and aching, protested, but Anya ignored them. The physical pain barely masked the flame of her determination. Her feet, heavy and numb, found a slow, steady rhythm in the snow. She breathed deeply, the icy air filling her lungs with raw energy. The image of hungry Lyra and the weak voice of Elder Vanya echoed, driving her on. Anya thought of Mikhail, her husband. He would have embraced her, his eyes full of pride. "You are stronger than you think, my Anya," he would say, and his voice was a balm. She felt the warmth of his hand, an invisible comfort. Grief was still a shadow, but the responsibility for 70 lives filled it with a purpose greater than pain. As the night advanced, the tundra's solitude became palpable. Kilometers of ice and snow stretched out, a profound silence that seemed to swallow everything. Anya felt like a tiny speck, but she was not disheartened. Her grandmother's ancestral wisdom about connecting with the earth guided her. She was not alone. The spirits of her ancestors and the love of her people surrounded her. The cold, though less intense, was constant, penetrating her clothes and biting her skin. Lips cracked and dry, thirst was agony. She stopped, melting a piece of ice in her mouth, relieving her throat. Each pause was a luxury, but also a necessity to recharge her strength. The sled, despite the effort, advanced at a snail's pace. For every kilometer, there seemed to be 10 more. The monotony of the landscape challenged her mind, tempting her with despair. But Anya refused to yield. She looked at the sled, the mountain of meat that represented salvation. It wasn't just food, it was proof of her courage. the materialization of her promise. Her eyes scanned the horizon, searching for any familiar sign. Nothing but white. Kitach seemed a distant dream, a mirage in the icy immensity. But she knew it was there, waiting, trusting. With each step, she visualized the faces of the children, the smiles of the elders, the warmth of the fires, life returning to the village. This vision was her fuel, more potent than food or rest. Anya was the bridge between desolation and hope. Her journey was not just physical, it was an odyssey of the soul, a testament to human resilience. She was the embodiment of Kitach's strength, a woman who, even with a heart shattered by grief, found the courage to defy death itself and the eternal winter. With renewed breath, she adjusted the straps and continued, a point of light in a world of ice, pulling the treasure that would save her village from extinction, reaffirming that the resilience of a Yakut woman can defy death itself in the heart of the eternal winter. Anya continued, a point of light in the world of ice, pulling the treasure that would save her village from extinction, reaffirming that the resilience of a Yakut woman can defy death itself in the heart of the eternal winter. Each step was a battle against inertia and pain. The sled, an extension of her body, grew heavier with each meter. Night deepened, stars dotting the dark veil. Her muscles were knots of pain, the buffalo hide straps cut into her shoulders, leaving red marks. Her breath came out in dense clouds, each exhalation a cry of exhaustion. She felt her toes numb, the cold settled deep in her bones. Anya closed her eyes, seeking refuge. Mikhail's image appeared clearly, his warm smile, the sparkle in his eyes when he called her my warrior. A tear escaped, freezing, not sadness, but deep longing, a reminder of the love that drove her. He would be proud. She knew. This certainty was her shield against despair. The landscape, a sea of white and grey, became a canvas of silver shadows under the moonlight. The silence was dense, broken only by the creaking of the sled and the muffled sound of her footsteps. The solitude was immense, but Anya did not feel helpless. She felt the presence of her ancestors, whispers of encouragement carried by the wind, the strength of generations of Yakuts who had overcome cruel winters. Suddenly, her feet slipped on treacherous ice and she fell to her knees, gasping. The sled stopped abruptly. Anya remained there, head bowed, body trembling. The urge to give up, to lie down in the snow, was a powerful temptation. But the image of Lyra, hungry and hopeful, flashed before her. Vanya, the elder, with his dry cough and stories, 70 lives. With a groan of effort, Anya rose. There was no room for weakness. The tundra did not forgive. She adjusted the straps, feeling the renewed pain, and pulled. The sled, with a groan, began to move. Every centimeter was a victory, every meter a conquest. She looked at the sky, at the solitary star, and felt a deep connection with the universe, with the earth, with her people. The smell of the buffalo meat, once a reminder of sacrifice, was now the perfume of salvation. She felt it mingled with the icy air, a raw and vital aroma that promised warmth, food, and life. It was the smell of hope, and Anya carried it with her step by step through the white hell. The sun would rise in hours, bringing a new day, closer to home and safety. Anya, a beacon of determination, defied the eternal winter, one step at a time, bringing life back to her village. But as the first pale rays of sun tried to break through the darkness, something strange happened. It wasn't the expected blizzard, nor the biting wind. A dense, low fog began to rise from the frozen ground, silently creeping across the tundra. In minutes, the world transformed. Visibility dropped drastically, and the familiar landscape of gentle hills and ice formations disappeared, swallowed by an opaque white veil. The horizon vanished, and Anya found herself in a cocoon of mist where sky and earth merged. Anya's heart tightened. This was no ordinary blizzard. It was an ice fog, as the elders called it, a freezing mist that stole vision and disoriented even the most experienced hunters. Fear, a cold, sharp pang, pierced her determination. To get lost now, with the village's treasure in tow, would be Kaitach's annihilation. She stopped, the heavy sled behind her, and closed her eyes, trying to calm her breathing. Doubt, a silent enemy, began to whisper in her mind. What if you don't find your way back? What if you fail? Anya opened her eyes, the fog dancing before her. She could see no more than a few meters. The terrain, once predictable, was now a trap, with fissures and uneven ground hidden beneath the white mantle. She remembered her grandmother's words. When your eyes fail, your other senses must be your guides. Anya lowered her staff, feeling the ice beneath her feet, searching for any vibration, any subtle inclination that might indicate direction. The wind, once a whisper, was now just a faint breeze, unable to guide. She was alone with her instincts. The image of Lyra, with her large, hungry eyes, and the weak cough of Vanya the elder, were the anchor that kept her from succumbing to panic. The smell of the meat, though faint in the fog, was a constant reminder of her mission. She could not fail, not after everything. With redoubled caution, Anya took her knife and began to test the ground before her, one step at a time, the sled following her like a heavy, invisible shadow. The journey, already a hell, had just become a treacherous white labyrinth. The journey, already a hell, had just become a treacherous white labyrinth. Anya moved her knife with extreme slowness, feeling every inch of the ground beneath the fog. The ice fog was a thick veil that erased the world, leaving her blind and disoriented. Her eyes, once accustomed to the tundra's vastness, were now useless. She breathed deeply, the icy air burning her nostrils, trying to catch any scent, any sound that might guide her. But there was only the oppressive silence of the fog. With each uncertain step, doubt deepened. A cold different from Yakutia's, a cold that came from within. What if I'm walking in circles? What if I drift even further from Kitach? The questions hammered her mind, threatening to erode her determination. She closed her eyes again, trying to visualize the map her grandfather had drawn in her mind, the lines of the hills, the curves of the frozen rivers. But the fog seemed to have erased even her visual memories. Anya remembered the voice of Mikhail, her husband, who always calmed her with his strong and gentle presence. Anya, my brave one, the greatest challenges are not out there but in here, he would say, touching her chest. And it was true. The fight against the fog was, above all, a fight against despair. She gripped the handle of her knife, feeling the cold texture of the metal, a tangible reminder of her mission. With a sigh that turned into vapor, Anya decided to rely on her other senses. She knelt, touching the ice with her gloved hands, feeling the small irregularities, the almost imperceptible slope of the terrain. Ancestral wisdom, passed down from generation to generation, spoke of feeling the earth, of connecting with it in a way that eyes could not comprehend. Slowly, she began to move, dragging the sled, not looking ahead, but at the ground beneath her feet and at the vibrations her staff transmitted. The sled, with its colossal weight, was now an even greater hindrance. Each time one of its runners sank a little deeper into the snow, Anya had to stop, dig with her numb hands, and pull with all her might to free it. Sweat ran down her forehead, freezing into tiny crystals that stung her skin. Her muscles screamed, but she silenced them with the image of Lyra, her hungry eyes, and Vanya, the elder, whose life depended on her perseverance. Suddenly, Anya's staff touched something different. It wasn't ice nor soft snow, but a rougher, irregular surface. She bent down, fumbling with her gloves, and felt the texture of exposed rocks covered by a thin layer of ice. It was a rocky outcrop, a landmark she recognized from her grandfather's stories. A thread of hope ignited in her chest. She was not completely lost. Anya knew that these outcrops formed a chain extending in a specific direction, a natural path to Kitach. With the fog still dense, she couldn't see the end of the chain, but she could feel it. With each step, she kept close to the rocks, using them as an invisible guide. Pain and exhaustion still accompanied her, but doubt had receded, replaced by renewed determination. She was not just a widow, she was the guardian of Kitach's hope, and she would continue step by step through the white labyrinth until the treasure was safe. Anya felt the rocky outcrop like a familiar embrace in the white darkness. It wasn't a sight, but a tactile certainty that resonated with her grandfather's stories. A map etched not on paper, but in the memory of her skin and bones. The rock, rough and covered by a thin layer of ice, was an Ariadne's thread in the labyrinth of the ice fog. She adjusted the sled straps, feeling the new hope infuse her with renewed breath, though her muscles continued to protest. Pain was an old friend, but now it had a clearer purpose, an echo of the promise made to her people. She couldn't see the rocks ahead, but she could feel them. With the knife in her right hand, she felt her way, while her left hand slid over the icy, irregular surface of the rock. Each protrusion, each indentation, was a silent confirmation that she was on the right path. The ice fog continued to envelop everything, transforming the world into an opaque void. But Anya had her compass, the earth beneath her hands and feet. With each step, the sled creaked and groaned, dragging itself with difficulty. The colossal weight of the buffalo seemed to challenge her with every meter, but the image of Kitach's hungry faces, Lyra's hopeful eyes, and the village's heavy silence were an even greater counterweight, a force that drove her on. Anya's mind, once plagued by doubt, now focused on the task with an almost supernatural clarity. She remembered Mikhail, her husband, who, on his hunts, always said, "The tundra has its secrets, Anya. Learn to listen to them, to feel them, and it will guide you." She was doing exactly that, not with her ears, for the fog's silence was almost absolute, broken only by the muffled sound of her footsteps and the dragging of the sled, but with the sensitivity of her hands and the intuition of her heart. The smell of the meat, though muffled by the humidity and cold, was a constant reminder of her victory and the promise she carried, a raw perfume of life and sustenance. The terrain began to grow more challenging. The rocks, once a constant guide, now became more rugged, with small crevices and treacherous unevenness hidden beneath the damp snow and fog. The sled, at times, got stuck between the stones, requiring Anya to stop, kneel, and, with her numb and stiff hands, free the trapped runners. Sweat ran down her forehead, mixing with the ice on her eyelashes, forming tiny stalactites that stung her skin, but she did not stop. Her cracked lips pressed into a thin line of pure obstinacy, an expression of unwavering determination. At one point, while trying to bypass a larger rock that seemed to emerge from the fog like an ancient monolith, the sled tilted dangerously. Anya felt her heart pound, a frantic drumming in her chest. If the buffalo fell sideways and got stuck, it would be almost impossible to lift it alone. With a muffled cry of effort that was lost in the white immensity, she pulled with all her strength, feeling the muscles in her back and shoulders scream in agony, every fiber of her being stretched to its limit. For an instant, the sled swayed precariously, but with a slow and determined movement, she managed to stabilize it. Feeling relief wash over her soul like a wave of warmth that chased away the cold. The exhaustion was immense, but with each obstacle overcome, a new layer of resilience formed within her, hardening her will. She was no longer just a woman. She was the embodiment of Kitach's will, guardian of 70 lives. The fog, which once seemed an invincible enemy, was now just another challenge to be overcome, a veil to be crossed. She moved like a ghost in the mist, a determined silhouette dragging her precious burden. With each step she drew closer to home, to her people, to the warmth of the fires and the smiles of the children. Kitak was waiting, and Anya would not fail. She was the bridge between desolation and hope, and she would continue to fight, step by step, against the eternal winter until the very last meter. Anya, feeling her body vibrate with the newly exerted effort, breathed deeply, the icy air tearing at her throat. The sled was safe for now. The fog, however, offered no respite, persisting like a thick blanket that muffled every sound, every sight. She continued to slide her hand along the cold rock, her only tangible guide in that world of whiteness. Every centimeter was a victory, every meter a silent prayer. Her fingers, almost numb inside her gloves, memorized the irregular texture of the stone, the small fissures that became landmarks in her blind journey. The silence was so profound that Anya could hear her own heart beating, a slow, tired rhythm. The tundra's solitude, amplified by the fog, was an overwhelming weight, but she was not truly alone. She felt Mikhail's presence, her husband, like a gentle warmth in her chest, an invisible force that enveloped her. He would have understood her, would have seen the warrior she had become. "Don't give up, my Anya." She could almost hear his voice, a whisper the wind could not carry away. This memory was a balm for her exhausted soul. The terrain began to change again. The rocks, once a solid wall, now became more sparse, fragmented, like broken teeth of a sleeping giant. Anya had to move a little further away to bypass a deep crevice that opened in the snow, an invisible abyss that would make her lose all her precious burden. Her heart pounded with the threat. She used her staff to test the ground, feeling the tip sink into a frightening void. With extreme caution, she pulled the sled in a wide arc, feeling the tension in her shoulders and legs. With each step, the effort was monumental. The buffalo, a treasure of life, seemed to want to root her in the snow, each pull demanding everything she had left. Her muscles trembled, and pain was a constant and relentless reminder of her humanity and her limits. But Lyra, with her hungry eyes and innocent hope, was an image stronger than any pain. Vanya, the elder, with his dry cough, was the voice of the village crying out for her. 70 lives depended on her next breath, her next step. The fog seemed endless, but Anya noticed a subtle change in the air, a different scent, faint, almost imperceptible. It wasn't the aroma of meat, nor the pure smell of ice. It was something earthier, more alive. She stopped, trying to identify the fragrance. Could it be the dampness of a frozen, mossy area, or perhaps the proximity of a water source? Her grandmother always said that the tundra spoke in whispers, and Anya was learning to listen to them. With renewed attention, she continued, now not only feeling the rocks, but also sniffing the air, searching for that subtle clue. The scent became a little more defined, an aroma of damp earth and something reminiscent of dry branches. It was a sign, she knew, a sign that she was approaching a more sheltered area, perhaps a small depression in the terrain where the snow was less deep and life, however dormant, was still present. Hope, a tenuous thread, ignited again in her heart. She was not lost. She was on her way. Kitak was closer. Anya followed the scent, an invisible thread in the white tapestry of the fog. It was an aroma of damp earth, frozen moss, and yes, dry branches, as if the tundra were breathing closer to her. Each inhalation was a map, each exhalation a prayer. She moved away from the sparse rocks, trusting the sense her grandmother said was the truest, the scent of the earth. The ice fog continued to envelop her, but now it was not an oppressive void, but a challenge to be deciphered. Her feet, once hesitant, gained new certainty, stepping more firmly, even though her vision remained stolen. The sled, with its immense weight, seemed to respond to her renewed determination, dragging itself with a creak that to Anya sounded like a song of hope. She felt the terrain's inclination change subtly, a gentle descent that led her into a depression, a tiny valley hidden in the vastness. There, the wind was almost non-existent, and the cold, though still biting, seemed less aggressive. The scent intensified, and Anya reached out, feeling the air. Her fingers brushed against something hard and rough, not rock, but wood. With a start in her heart, she knelt, her gloves brushing the surface. It was a log, a fallen branch, covered by a thin layer of ice. It wasn't a tree, but a tangle of dwarf shrubs, twisted and resilient, clinging to life in that natural shelter. It was an unequivocal sign. She was in one of the small valleys that dotted the path to Kitach, places where life refused to die completely, even in the harshest winter. A wave of relief, warm and powerful, swept away Anya's weariness. Her shoulders relaxed for an instant, and a trembling sigh escaped her cracked lips. It wasn't the end of the journey, but it was confirmation that she wasn't lost, that her instincts and the wisdom of her ancestors had guided her correctly. The image of hungry Lyra, now with a hopeful smile, shone in her mind. Vanya, the elder, with his cough, but now with a glimmer of gratitude in his eyes. The village of Kitach, once a distant mirage, now seemed an achievable destination. Anya stood up, the pain in her muscles still present, but now a lighter burden. She knew she needed to rest, even if only for a few minutes. The more sheltered terrain offered a chance. Carefully, she unhitched the sled straps, letting the colossal buffalo rest in the snow. She sat on a piece of reindeer hide she carried, leaning against the sled, using the buffalo's body as a shield against the invisible cold. She took off her gloves, her fingers pale and numb, and rubbed them vigorously. Warmth was slow to return, but the sensation of life returning to her limbs was a small victory. She took a piece of dried meat from her pouch, chewing it slowly, feeling the energy, however small, spread through her body. The fog still persisted, but the darkness of night was beginning to yield to a pale grey, indicating the proximity of dawn. Soon, the sun would try to pierce the white veil, and perhaps, just perhaps, the fog would dissipate. Anya closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to meditate, to connect with the earth, and with Mikhail. He would be proud, she knew. This certainty warmed her heart more than the dried meat, more than any fire. The journey was still long and dangerous, but hope, now, was a brighter beacon, guiding her through the darkness and ice. She wasn't just dragging a buffalo, she was carrying the faith of her people, the promise of a future. And with that faith, she knew she would overcome any obstacle the tundra might still throw in her path, until the last and most difficult step. Anya, feeling the faint warmth of the dried meat spread, opened her eyes. The pale grey of dawn tried, unsuccessfully, to pierce the veil of the ice fog. The fog, though still dense, seemed to have a different, lighter texture, as if it were about to dissipate. She stood up, the stiffness in her muscles a constant reminder of the long journey. The short break had invigorated her spirit, but her body cried out for rest. Just a little more, she whispered to herself, adjusting the sled straps. Feeling the familiar and colossal weight of the buffalo, she began to pull again, the creaking of the sled echoing in the muffled silence. The smell of damp earth and dry branches still guided her, but with each step, the terrain became flatter and more open. The valley depression was falling behind. The fog suddenly began to move, not rising, but twisting in slow eddies, like an restless spirit. For brief seconds, gaps opened, revealing a glimpse of what lay ahead. And what Anya saw made her heart freeze. It wasn't the rocky tundra or the deep snow she expected. Ahead of her stretched a vastness of pure ice, smooth and shimmering, almost like a mirror. But it was not a safe mirror, it was a treacherous ice field with thin, dark cracks snaking across the entire surface, like veins of a sleeping creature. The thin ice, as the elders called it, a treacherous layer covering deep, frozen waters, ready to give way under weight. Panic threatened to overwhelm her. Crossing that field with a 5 kilo buffalo was madness, suicide. A single crack, a single misstep, and everything would be lost. Her, the buffalo, Ketak's hope, the image of Lyra, now with wide eyes of fear, and Vanya coughing desperately flooded her mind. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to push away the terror. Mikhail, his voice, again, in her mind. Anya, my brave one, listen to the ice. It speaks. He had taught her the art of reading cracks, of feeling vibrations, of understanding winter's silent language. It was knowledge that seemed impossible to use now, with the fog still obscuring most of the field. She unhitched the sled straps and knelt, taking off her gloves. With bare hands, she touched the ice, feeling the intense cold that burned her fingers. She closed her eyes and concentrated, not on sight, but on sensation. The vibrations, the thin ice emitted a subtle, almost inaudible hum, a murmur of danger. She began to feel her way, sensing the cracks, the depressions, the areas where the ice seemed thicker, more solid. It was a deadly puzzle, and Anya was the only one who could solve it. She remembered her grandfather, who told stories of hunters crossing frozen lakes with intuition alone. "Trust your feet, Anya," he would say. "They know the way before your eyes do." With extreme caution, she stood up, took her staff, and began to test the ice ahead of her, 1 centimeter at a time. The buffalo, an immense weight, seemed an insurmountable burden. But it wasn't just a burden, it was salvation. She had to take it. The ice groaned under her staff, a sharp, frightening sound. Anya felt every vibration through the wood, deciphering the ice's strength. She found a path, a thin, winding line that seemed safer, a thread of hope amidst the danger. It was a long detour, but a necessary one. She hitched the sled again, her heart pounding in her chest. "Lyra, Vanya, Kaitak," she whispered like a mantra. Each step was an act of faith, each pull a prayer. The ice cracked and groaned, but Anya did not look back. Her eyes were fixed on the fog ahead, searching for the next clue, the next sign. She was the bridge between life and death, and she would not yield. The tundra could be cruel, but the will of a Yakut mother was stronger than ice and the eternal winter. She advanced, 1 step at a time, towards her destiny, towards life and her village. Anya continued to advance, the thin ice groaning and cracking beneath the sled. Each pull was an act of faith, each vibration of the staff a message. She felt the danger, but also the certainty that she was on the right path. The tenuous line her ancestors had taught her to decipher was her only compass. Icy sweat ran down her forehead, but her eyes were fixed on the point where the fog seemed less dense. Lyra, Vanya, Kaitak. These words were a rhythm in her heart, driving her on. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the white veil began to unravel. Small eddies formed and dissipated, revealing patches of pale blue in the sky above. The air, once heavy and damp, now felt lighter, crisper. Anya felt a shiver of hope run through her exhausted body. She continued to pull, her muscles burning, but the promise of clear vision was a balm. The cracks in the ice were still a threat, but with each meter, the surface seemed more solid, more reliable. She could feel the transition, the change from thin ice to a thicker, older layer. Finally, with a last effort that made her stumble, the sled slid onto an area of firm ice covered by a thin layer of compacted snow. Anya released the straps, falling to her knees, air escaping her lungs in a deep sigh. She had made it. When she lifted her head, the fog was rising like a sleeping spirit, revealing the world around her. First, the familiar hills, covered in dark pines and sprinkled with snow. Then, the curve of the frozen river, a white embrace that enveloped the land. And then, on the horizon, a dark smudge that grew, taking shape. Kaitak. The small wooden houses, with their chimneys releasing faint smoke, appeared like a miracle. Anya's heart leaped, a mixture of relief, joy, and a deep ache for Mikhail's absence. She had returned. She had fulfilled her promise. Still on her knees, Anya saw a small figure emerge from one of the cabins, followed by another, and then more. It was Lyra and Vanya who, despite the distance, seemed to have sensed her presence. Lyra, in a fur coat that made her look like a small bear, pointed at her, and Vanya, the elder, raised a trembling arm. A sharp cry from Lyra, muffled by the distance, reached Anya's ears, and soon the entire village seemed to be in motion, running towards her. Anya stood up, staggering, but with renewed strength. She wasn't just dragging a buffalo. She was bringing life back to Kaitak. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the ice on her eyelashes, but they were tears of gratitude and a peace she hadn't felt in a long time. The weight of grief was still there, but now it was intertwined with the lightness of hope. When the first villagers reached her, Lyra ran to her, her thin arms wrapping around her legs. Anya knelt, embracing the girl with all the strength she had left, feeling the warmth of life, Kitach's future in her arms. Vanya, with tear-filled eyes, touched her shoulder. "You've returned, Anya. You saved us." She looked at the colossal buffalo, the temple of flesh and ice, and then at the faces of her people, hungry, but now filled with a renewed light. Winter was still long, but Kitach had a chance. Anya was the bridge, the guardian, the woman who defied the eternal winter and brought life back. Exhaustion overwhelmed her, but the feeling of having fulfilled her purpose was stronger than any pain. She had done what seemed impossible, and Kitach's heart would beat again, strong and resilient like hers. Anya felt Lyra's arms tighten around her waist, a small embrace that carried the weight of all future. The smell of smoke and the girl's fur was a balm to her exhausted senses. Vanya, his voice choked with emotion and cough, repeated, "You saved us, Anya." Other villagers approached, their faces marked by hunger and worry, now illuminated by an almost feverish hope. Hands reached out to touch her shoulder, her arms, a silent gesture of gratitude and reverence. The barrier of solitude that had accompanied her for so many days finally broke, replaced by the warmth of community. The younger men, led by a robust elder named Boris, who had been Mikhail's friend, immediately turned to the buffalo. Their expressions were of astonishment and admiration before the colossal creature. "It's a temple of flesh, Anya," exclaimed Boris, his eyes wide. "How did you ache?" He didn't need to finish the question. The answer was in Anya's exhaustion, in the ice dust on her clothes, in the determination that still shone in her eyes. With coordinated effort and shouts of encouragement, the men began to prepare the buffalo to be dragged to the center of the village. The women, in turn, surrounded Anya, offering her warm water and pieces of dried meat they had kept like a treasure. She accepted, feeling her throat parched and her body crying out for nourishment. Lyra didn't let go of her, nestled by her side, observing everything with childlike curiosity, but with a new light of security in her eyes. The village transformed into an anthill of activity. Fires were lit, the crackling of dry wood and the smell of smoke filling the air. The children, once silent and pale, now ran and laughed, the promise of food and warmth restoring their energy. The sound of axes and knives against the buffalo meat echoed, a sound of life, of rebirth. Anya watched, feeling her body heavy, but her heart light. Grief for Mikhail was still a shadow, but now it was a shadow that mingled with the light of her own strength, of her own ability to protect those she loved. That night, the village of Kaitach gathered around the fires. The buffalo meat, slowly roasted, filled the air with a divine aroma. People ate with eagerness and reverence, each bite a silent thanks to the woman who defied the eternal winter. Anya, sitting beside Lyra, who slept deeply in her lap, felt the warmth of the flames and human warmth. Vanya, with a more serene countenance, sat near her, his eyes fixed on the fire. "You brought more than food, Anya," he said, his voice hoarse. "You brought faith back to Kitach." She smiled, a tired but genuine smile. The journey had been a white hell, a battle against nature and against herself. But she had found the strength, the ancestral wisdom, the resilience her people so valued. She had become the bridge between desolation and hope, and in doing so had reconnected with the essence of her own existence. Winter was still long, and the challenges would not cease. But Kitach now had the buffalo meat, renewed hope, and the certainty that even in the most brutal conditions, the human spirit, driven by love and community, was capable of overcoming the impossible. Anya, the widow who became guardian, looked at the night sky, where the stars began to pierce the veil of fog. Mikhail would be proud, and she, for the first time in a long time, felt at peace. Kitach would survive, and she would be a fundamental part of this story of overcoming, a living testament to the unwavering strength of a Yakut woman in the heart of the eternal winter. The next morning, the air was still icy, but a different warmth, a warmth of life, emanated from the cabins. The smell of roasted meat lingered, mingling with the smoke from the fires that burned with more vigor. Lyra woke in Anya's arms, her eyes shining with renewed energy. The girl stretched, her stomach satisfied and her face rosy. Anya hugged her tightly, feeling the small body vibrate with life. The pain in her muscles was a constant reminder, but now a sweet pain, the mark of victory. She watched the first rays of sun try to break through the fog. The ice fog seemed less threatening, as if the tundra itself recognized the new hope that was blossoming. The villagers moved with renewed purpose. Men, with Boris at the forefront, worked on the buffalo meat, cutting it to dry and store. Women prepared nutritious and warm broths. Children, once quiet, now ran and played in the snow, their laughter echoing through the village like a forgotten song. Vanya, the elder, watched from his cabin, a serene and proud smile. He saw Anya stand up, still with Lyra in her arms, and walk to the central fire. Their eyes met, and a silent nod of understanding passed between them. Kitach's leadership, once divided, now had a new pillar in Anya's silent strength. She did not seek power, but had earned it with altruism and courage. Anya sat by the fire, Lyra nestled close, eating tender meat. She felt Mikhail's presence, not as pain, but as a comforting warmth. He had taught her to hunt, to read the tundra, to trust her instincts. Everything he had given her, she had used to save her people. Grief had transformed into part of her strength, a memory that propelled her into the future. Her eyes scanned the faces of her people, reflections of resilience. Kitach was not just a place, it was a family, a promise. Winter would still be long and relentless. Other challenges would arise. The tundra always tested its children. But now they had more than food. They had the certainty that faith could move mountains of ice, that love could warm the coldest hearts in the village. The colossal buffalo was not just meat, it was a symbol, a living legend told for generations. The story of Anya, the widow, driven by love and responsibility, faced the impossible and brought life back to everyone. The provisions would last for months. More importantly, hope, once frozen, flowed again through Kitach's veins. Anya looked at Lyra, who was now sleeping, her face serene. She kissed the girl's forehead, feeling love overflow in her chest. The journey had ended, but her own journey, as Kitach's guardian, was just beginning. She stood up, her body tired but her spirit unshakable. The sun finally broke through the fog, painting the sky in golden and rosy hues, illuminating the village. Kitach, bathed in light, seemed reborn. Anya breathed deeply the icy air, feeling life in every fiber. She was the strength, the hope, the pulsating heart of her people. And as long as there was a Yakut in Kaitach, the flame of resilience would never be extinguished.